Welcome to the Leadmore Podcast, the show where we sit down and talk to leaders of the past and the present to create and inspire more leaders for the future. I'm your host, John T. Meyer, and I believe our world needs more leaders. That's why this show exists. Here in episode number 11, we sat down with the head of school at the Baan Dek Montessori School, Charlotte Snyder. We focused on our little leaders. How do you spot leaders at a young age with our children? We talked about how as parents we can encourage and foster that leadership. We looked into how are schools changing in the middle of a global pandemic. And lastly, how we all, adults too, can apply some Montessori philosophy to our everyday life. You're going to love the conversation I have with Charlotte, so let's dig right in. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well. You know, it's the beautiful late August days here in South Dakota, and I know school is about to start. You guys, in some ways, have never really finished, but it starts a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I'll caveat here, both of my two little girls go to Baan Dek Montessori, the school that you are head of. And I wanted to talk about leadership and how you guys have acted in a time of crisis of how to adjust the way that you run a school, which is not an easy thing to do. And so let's start with, tell us a little bit about, for those listening, if they don't know, what is Montessori? What is a Montessori school? What does that mean? How is it different than a typical school?
Yeah. So Montessori is a philosophy that's been around for over 100 years. So it was started by Dr. Maria Montessori in Italy in the early 1900s. And it's the oldest continuously used pedagogy that we're aware of.
Wow.
And so when most people think of Montessori schools, if they know anything about Montessori, often the response is, it's for little kids. And, that's the school where children get to do whatever they want, or on the other hand, that's the school with all the rules. And so neither and
so completely the opposite.
Yep, and neither and both of those are exactly accurate. So Montessori is a philosophy, it's a pedagogy. If you've been in this long enough, it becomes part of your life. The most common age group is 3 to 6. So Dr. Montessori observed and believed that we have these stages of development, and they're kind of 6 years. So 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, and 18 to 24. And at 24, our brain is more fully developed, but the most dramatic change is between 0 and 6. And
Sure.
So each of those are different levels of Montessori, and they all have different, Dr. Montessori calls them powers, things that impact an individual's life and driving forces within them. And each of those has different strengths and areas that we work to support children and young adults. And so the age group that we have here at Baan Dek is 15 months to 6. And so it's that primary age group. But there are Montessori schools all over the world that are following this same philosophy and who are implementing essentially the same practices as we're implementing in Sioux Falls.
I know that you're from California, but you run a Montessori school in South Dakota. So let's talk about your leadership journey. How did you get here?
So I grew up in California. I was born in San Francisco, and my family moved to Chicago for about 4 years, and that's where my sister was born. And then we moved back to Central Coast of California, and I lived there until I was 18. And I actually went to a Montessori school through...
I was going to ask, I thought that was your connection.
Yep. So I went to a Montessori school through the elementary program, so through 6th grade. And then I went to public school for middle school, and then I went to 3 different high schools and had all kinds of adventures.
Wow.
And then, yeah.
You tried it all.
I did. I went to a private small school, and I went to a charter school, an art-based charter school, and then I went to just the really big public high school, and that was actually the best experience. When people say they're a little concerned about their child going to a public program after having been in a Montessori program, public high school was my absolute favorite, and I really, really, really loved it. I can sympathize with that, but my experience was not any challenge there for moving from a Montessori environment to a traditional environment. And then,
is that assumption? Sorry to interrupt you, but I think I hear that a lot. Is that because people view Montessori as sort of lawless versus the traditional school, very much like get in line, follow, sit in a specific spot, do this, do that, right?
Yep. And so on the one hand, we really love what Montessori gives our children. We really love that Montessori sees our children as individuals, that Montessori is focused on individualizing that educational experience, that you do work on what is most developmentally appropriate for you at this moment. And if that means we're spending a lot of time with this activity and then taking off, or it means we're really attaching to certain skills quickly and then later skills take a long time, the timeline is very individualized for each child, which is not to say that if you don't like math, we're not doing math, but it is to say that we're going to foster and grow the things that come quickly for you, and we're going to figure out a way to present to you the things that maybe aren't the most favorite or don't come as naturally, because we all do have areas where things come really easily and things that don't. The leadership skills and independence that comes with Montessori and being able to make your own choices really appeals to a lot of people. But we don't want our children to take too much initiative when they're in a more traditional environment and be the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, or be that peg that gets kind of smashed down when more in a traditional environment. We worry that our children are going to be in a position where that leadership or that independence is going to be perceived in a negative way. And we always want our children to have the best of every situation.
Yeah. Well, I want to get back to that leadership, but I kind of sidetracked us, so I apologize.
No, not at all.
So by 18, you've done almost every sort of school there is. Then what happened next?
Yep. And so then I went to university in San Diego. I went to San Diego State. And then I left and didn't know what I wanted really to do. I didn't know. I kind of wanted to do HR stuff, or I kind of wanted to do Montessori teaching, because I found Montessori really formed how I think about things. There's a Montessori material that's pretty iconic. It's called the trinomial cube, and it's a 27-piece cube puzzle that's actually a preparation for algebra that our 3 and 4-year-olds are using. And you see this unit, and you take apart all 27 pieces, and then you put it back together to form this same structure. And that really was a clear visual of how I approached all of my learning experiences of, okay, let's look at the big picture, take apart all the pieces and then put it back together. So in my university studies, I had an emphasis in shared stories, or wanting to take the broad strokes, or where does this fit? Where does this science piece fit into history, and where are those connections? And so that was really fundamental for how I viewed the world. And so I kind of felt a sense of responsibility of like, if I'm drawn to this, it's my responsibility to pay it forward. And I really found Montessori appealing. I always just love school. And so I never intended to be a teacher. I never intended to be in education. But I found myself teaching in every position that I was in. So I moved to Portland and I took the Montessori training there. And then I taught for a little while in Germany and at the public Montessori program in Milwaukee. And then I moved here to Sioux Falls.
So was that a job posting, or how did you find Baan Dek?
Yeah, it was a job posting. I thought nobody moves to South Dakota. People move from South Dakota. I thought, oh, it'll be a good next step. You do anything for 2 years and I can learn so much here because I was so excited about everything they were doing at Baan Dek. And now it's the start of my 10th year, and I live here now.
That's great. Yeah, and that's been a theme in this show, is how leaders, sometimes the paths are unknown and maybe the least expected. And so, you started as, what was it? Were you the first teacher or first employee 10 years ago?
Yep. So it was the first hire of like an outside person, because the founders were married, and then the first teacher, and it's been a lot of growth from one room classroom to now a whole school.
Yeah, and now you are the head of the school, so you sort of grew into that leadership role. And let's talk about education in 2020 looks very different. And so again, I remember when Margot, our 4.5-year-old, when we first came and looked at it, Paige and I, my wife, first time we walked in that classroom for a tour, my jaw dropped, because you walk in the room and 20 plus children are working on 20 plus different things, all individually. It's dead quiet. I mean, there's talk and like chatter, but everyone's very focused. And we fell in love with it right away. Now it looks a little bit different. We can't walk in. We can't, come in and bring our children in. So when March hit, you guys were closed for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And then started to adjust and reopen the school. Walk us through how you guys had to change in your thought process, and what does a school look like during a pandemic?
Yeah. So we follow the public school district. We get weather in South Dakota, and so blizzards,
snow days, yep,
all of that stuff. So it just made sense. And then as those 2 weeks progressed, the governor was calling for schools to stay closed longer, and the Department of Social Services, who regulate like daycare centers, and because of the age of our children, we have a school in both camps.
Mm-hmm.
And so daycares almost universally weren't closed, schools almost universally were closed. And so we had to be really mindful about the path forward and really intentional. We couldn't just default to what our accrediting bodies are saying. And so making sure that we're doing what is regulated, but also being mindful of the differences between some of those. And our highest mandate is to serve the needs of our families and to the care and safety and well-being of the children who are with us each day. And so really needing to have some difficult conversations with the Department of Health and Social Services and all of these different parties, because with how everything looked at the time when we were making these decisions in March, it looked like the pandemic wasn't going anywhere. This was not going to be 2 weeks and then back to business as usual. And so just saying, oh, we'll figure it out later was not an option, because families have chosen our school for a variety of reasons, but they have chosen our school. And so we didn't want to say, oh, well, we're closed. You need to figure out a different solution, particularly in such a stressful time. So many of our families did not have the option of either working from home, or if they were able to work from home, that's still work in your home setting. That is not the same as vacation or time together. And even when you have the ability for vacation, children love routine, and you've chosen our school and you've entrusted us with your children's care. And we need that routine in our lives, particularly when everything else is so tumultuous. And so we had to be really mindful of the fact that we need to be implementing policies as soon as possible that are sustainable, that keep everyone safe, and that we can grow from, not come back, have something catastrophic happen, and then rein those in. So we started out with offering space to our current families who fell under the umbrella of essential critical infrastructure workforce, as set by Homeland Security. And that actually is most of our families, just because of what's included there. And then as time progressed, how that grew. If families were interested in returning, yes, please return. And then as summer developed, then having some families who were going to be joining later on, moving up their start date. And now as we're approaching fall, how do we do virtual tours? How do we handle observations? All of these other pieces that new families are considering Baan Dek. And how do we offer an experience so that you can consider our school and know what it is we offer and build a relationship of trust without ever actually having set foot in this space or meeting face to face. And so all of those have become really thoughtful considerations. And I think one of the biggest things that we're all learning is that everything that was a given before is now a question.
Interesting. Yeah. So you have to be prepared for every question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, that story, that trust thing is true. Our younger daughter started in a pandemic. She's 1.5 and she doesn't know any different at Baan Dek than me driving up to the curb, a teacher opening the door with a mask on, taking her temperature, and then escorting her in. And that, I've never walked into school with her. And in some ways, that's probably weirder for me than it is for her, because it's normal for her, and kids, of course, are so adaptable. So
it's kind of amazing because families, we do have quite a few siblings at that age group. And so families who have had an older child and have had that experience of walking their child to the door and saying goodbye at the door, it's always bittersweet of off you go and there goes my heart.
Tears,
Yeah. And then to have this different experience of, like you described at the door, there's a lot of anxiety there of, I can't walk my child to the door, and how is my younger child going to adjust? And realistically, it's actually easier, the children, here we go, this is what we're doing.
Yep.
It's a little bit of a quicker Band-Aid. And so children are doing so much better in this than we adults are.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I've also learned they give such great perspective on just an outlook on life, right? When we're all feeling pretty down or negative about how much has changed, they're just happy as can be. So let's talk about that. What does, you've been in the classroom, now you also run the school. You touched briefly on, Montessori probably encourages or certainly doesn't shy away from letting children kind of step out or become leaders. When have you spotted those characteristics? Students start at 15, 16 months. How early? There's this debate in the leadership world: are leaders born or are they made? As a teacher, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So leadership and altruism are qualities that we foster in those earliest days. And there's kind of a vernacular piece of leader kind of implies that it's a small group leading a large group. And so there can't be a lot of leaders, or a majority of people can't be leaders. And I would say that in a Montessori classroom, everyone is learning how to be a leader. And how that manifests is in very different ways. So there are those children who are just your typical charismatic leader. If they're doing something, everybody wants to do it. If they start giggling, then everybody's going to start giggling. If they get ready to go outside really, really quickly, we're going to go outside in 5 minutes. And then there's other children who demonstrate leadership, but in different ways. So if they walk past something, they always pick it up. Or they're very attuned with the youngest children, and they might manifest as being, fearful of their own shadow. But then when there's this brand new child, they're over there encouraging them to get a drink of water, or they're helping them to open the fridge and then carrying on with their business. And so there's leadership skills that are not age-based. They're not necessarily ability-based, and they're not all loud and charismatic and type A personality. That every child is demonstrating leadership in different ways, and ways that are unique to their personality. And that's just baseline everyday stuff in Montessori of helping others. Of if not me, who? If not now, when? Of care of others, of my independence and my freedom ends where it would impact someone else in a negative way, or in a way that they might perceive as negative. And all of those are leadership qualities.
That's interesting. So there's sort of either that kind of natural born charismatic leader, but also that lead by example. When you talked about picking something up and showing everyone else, you do it even if people aren't watching. You're wired to do that.
Yeah, and I think that starts as soon as children are aware that there are other children here, which at the youngest age group sometimes isn't the case. It's like they're kind of oblivious to the fact that these are other humans. There's just kind of there's a something touching my lunchbox, or there's something in my way when I'm trying to get here, and they haven't quite realized that those are other humans just like them. And then there's this awareness that like, oh no, that's another person. I can't sit there because that's another person. And that emerges, and that grace that develops when you kind of put your own needs aside, because you recognize that this is a whole other human. Those are acts of leadership.
That's great. Sort of a core thesis of Leadmore is that leaders come in all shapes and sizes and colors and genders, and there's certainly not one way to lead. And I think you touched on that there. Do you find, so if a parent, Montessori or not, I think sometimes I'm guilty of this by having two children now. We want to sort of compare, we want to put labels like she's this way and she's that way. Obviously children are changing all the time. How can we foster or encourage that leadership quality or nurture that without pushing?
Yeah. So recognizing, like you said, that leadership comes in many different ways, and leadership is looking out for others, and noticing the pieces that we do come hardwired. Some of us come hardwired as gentle observers, and maybe we have extra space in our heart for looking out for the person who might not jump in, and encouraging them, or asking them if they would like to play, because sometimes it's hard for you to join in too, isn't it? So wouldn't you like it if somebody invited you to play? If you'd like to invite them to play, they might like that too. Or for those charismatic, louder leaders, finding opportunities for that as well, of maybe not always doing what those louder leaders say, because sometimes in a family dynamic, we get used to wanting to do whatever children want to do, and then it can kind of push the line from bossy, but also not wanting to shut it down, or not wanting to quiet their voice, but helping those children to see that sometimes we're going to do what you want, and sometimes we're not. But when we have what's your favorite for dinner, fantastic, and when we have what's somebody else's favorite for dinner, that's also fantastic. And as much enjoyment as you have when we play your game, that's as much enjoyment as your sibling has when we play their game. And how good does it feel when we do what you want? Because those children, if you're charismatic, you're also often very empathetic. And so attaching to that, it feels good when we do what you want, and you love that person. So if we do what they want, I bet it feels good to them too. And so helping them to find those balances of when we are going to do what you want, and when we're not, and when that doesn't mean you're ignored. You're still part of the community, and you're still important, and you have a lot to add beyond the role of entertainer, or you have a lot to add even if it's hard for you to speak up.
That's great. I think in my world of business, I think we think it's a zero-sum game. You either win or you lose. Like you get the contract or you don't. And I think everything you just said, which you're applying in the lens of 1 to 6-year-olds, applies just the same to a corporate environment or employees. Those same sort of discussions and questions. So one of the things I wrote down that I want to ask you we talked about this with Professor David O'Hara, that I think teachers are very underrated leaders. I think you are a leader. And so I have to ask you, you have this incredible ability. You sort of just did it right there. And if people are listening on the podcast, you have this very calm demeanor and this sort of deliberate tone and cadence when you speak. And I've seen it certainly to the children, but even to us as parents. I know when we're stressed out and we call or email and say, she's doing this, what should we do? She won't get in her car seat. And you walk us through this is that just you, or is that something that a switch that you turn on, that tone that you so perfectly deliver?
I think it's part of that. If you've been in Montessori long enough, that it starts to become part of your personality. And I can tell when I do it, if I'm modeling for adults how we would introduce this to a child, it does kind of feel like a switch. But it's not as intentional anymore. That it just kind of becomes, this is a time that needs a little bit of soothing. And this is, a time when we just all need to be sure that we all are just seeking the message that nothing bad is happening. And so encouraging that in others, whether that's a child or an adult, of nothing bad is happening. Everything is fixable. We can address this together, is a really important message that sometimes we don't hear enough.
Yeah, and that's so relevant for today, right? I mean, I think parenting in general is stressful, and you got Baan Dek always has that calm demeanor, but we all could use a little bit of that right now. Mm-hmm. So if I asked your husband, like, if you give advice or you're telling him how to cook the dinner, what would he say? Would he say you still speak in that same deliberate, calm tone? Or
no, I'm a bit more salty at home. Yeah, we all, children and adults alike, we're on our best behavior outside of the home, and then when we are with our most loved, that we know that we're loved no matter what, we get a little bit more prickly.
Yeah. Well, you say that a lot in terms of the children, which is so true. I think we see our girls on their best behavior at school, and sometimes we get them at their worst at home, but that's okay. We still love them.
Yep. I
want to shift gears now to thinking about this fall for parents who may have students. You were also supporting parents remotely when this all started. You had both the students in the classroom, and then for those who chose not to come back. There's a lot of, in some parts of the country, it's already predetermined school's going to be remote. In other parts, like here, they're going to try, and we'll see how it goes. What advice would you have to parents who now are trying to also have a /teacher title in their name?
Yeah. So when all of this started, I did a podcast with my mom because as I grew up, I found out my mom actually wanted to be a Montessori teacher when she was figuring out her career. And so there was a reason we were at a Montessori school. But when I was young, my mom worked from home. And so during the summer, or if we were sick or anything like that, she was doing what a lot of people are needing to figure out now. She was doing that all the time. How are you at home, but you're still working? And how do you convey that to a child, especially like during the summer months where it is vacation? I'm still around, but it's not vacation for me. And so setting that up for a child. And I talked with her about, strategies of like, what did she do, or what recommendations does she have of creating a routine is hugely important, which is something we do in Montessori, of having your routine. Maybe it's, waking up and making breakfast together, and then, we're going to work heads down for this amount of time, and keeping that structure, or having time that, we go outside and have a break in our day. And then when it's time for one-on-one, when the work time is done for both of us, whether that be throughout the day or at the beginning and end of the day, whatever that looks like, be 100% there. which is another thing we experience even in the classroom. We're not on phones in the classroom because when we are here, we are here. And when I'm having a conversation with another child or with an adult, a child who needs me or who just wants to talk will come and stand nearby, but they won't interrupt, because when I am talking to you, I will give you 100% of my attention. And we can cue this with something like, I see you. That indicates to me that you need something. You like it when I listen with both my ears. This person likes that too. And so they get it acclimated to that, because then when I am one-on-one with that child, if they just want to share a story or if they need assistance, I'm at their level, I'm on their time. And until this is satisfied, until, we've fixed the problem or you've told me the story you wanted to tell me, you have 100% of my attention. And so then they don't feel the need to monopolize or interrupt or tell a story that says, and then, because they're afraid of losing your attention, because they know that they'll get the attention again. So having those opportunities to really be fully dedicated to whoever you are with at the time, if that means sending emails with earplugs in and setting a timer, and I have to answer all of my emails in the next 15 minutes. There is no or what, it just has to happen. And then being able to give yourself fully to children. And not all of us have that luxury. Sometimes we do need to have things take longer or things come up where we're on call. But to find ways that we all have the ability to put limits on ourselves that allow us to be present for the people who are around. So maybe that means, my Instagram time gets lowered because I need to spend more time on email. And so then when I am split focused, I'm not playing Sudoku or I'm not checking Facebook or texting a friend. So those pieces get lessened because it's ambiguous to my child when I'm available and working and when I'm not. And I want to send the message that when I'm on my phone, I am working. And so then I keep that playtime on my phone outside of their eyes or outside of their waking hours. So having cues, having things that children can tap into. Sometimes it means waking up really early. In our current situation, we do have kind of the luxury of working often when we need to. So if that means we need to get up and exercise before the children wake up so that we can be fully present when they need us, because between these hours, we don't have flexibility, or maybe certain things get put on hold because the children do need our presence during those times. And it's definitely one of those things that if we have children in our lives, if we invest in them and in getting them settled and in helping them to feel content and at ease and seen, then they give us more space to go and do all of those things. It seems counterintuitive that if I give them more time, they'll only need more time. But it is a safety thing for a child.
No, that's so good. If you're watching a video, I kind of scratch my head feeling guilty about that, right? It's this idea that okay, in 30 minutes, I'm going to do both. I'm going to parent and work. Whereas if I just did 15 minutes of work and 15 minutes of, 100% parenting, I'm sure everybody would be better off. This idea of trying to do both is you're doing both at 50%, as you said.
Yeah. And it everything takes longer. And then we find ourselves feeling frustrated. You're not going to send a grouchy email. You're going to be grouchy with your partner, or you're going to be grouchy with the everyone always needing you every minute of the day. That you're not going to have your worst behavior with a client. And those we love the most often get our worst behavior, but they don't deserve our worst behavior. And sometimes it's just something as simple as being like, I do have to answer this, and even stepping away from the table, because there are going to be things that are urgent, especially during a pandemic. there are going to be real crises, but stepping away, creating some kind of physical barrier, walking away, interrupting yourself respectfully, like, I enjoyed playing with you. I promise that we will be able to play again. And I'm really sorry that I can't uphold my promise this time of we were going to have this much time to play. I need to go do this. But then just to be mindful of those times of when the situation necessitated breaking your promise, so that those necessities don't become routine. That there will be urgencies, and we all have a lot more tolerance when those urgencies are infrequent, and when we do uphold our word most of the time, and when we mean we say most of the time, and whether you're a child or an adult, we want to be respected and seen and heard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So if you have to be a teacher this fall, I like that. Like we'll say, create separation of space, delegate space, routine and consistency. And then when you do something, do it 100%. I like those tips. Yeah. Okay, we're going to do one more question, and then we'll do some rapid fire to finish up. Regardless of pandemic, is there anything that, I don't think a lot of children listen to this podcast yet, so probably adults. Is there anything that we could apply to from the Montessori philosophy that you think applies nicely to our society, to our adult life, that maybe we all could use a little bit more of a piece of Montessori?
Yeah. There's a lot. The idea of preparing the conditions. So we focus a lot on as the adults in the environment. I can't make a child do anything. If a child is made to do something, they only do it because they're afraid, or I've broken their will. Those are there are really negative reasons that a child would do something because I made them. And we don't want any of that. We want children to have free will and to choose what's best, to choose the pro-social approach. So creating the conditions by our language or the systems we set up to help those around us be successful. And that is good if you're a parent, or if you live alone, even if you're only working with your own self, what is an obstacle that you're currently facing, and how can you reverse engineer a solution? So if it's
would that be similar to they say if you want to go for a run, leave your shoes by next to the bed?
Correct.
Yeah,
so I have to be really tidy at school, especially in the classroom. Everything has a place. It's museum quality all the time. I am not at home. I fold all my husband's clothes. I do the laundry at our house. I fold all my husband's clothes, and my clothes get kind of put somewhere. And they don't like that about myself. And so then I decided, okay, so when he takes Truckee out for his evening walk, then I will get up and, do my tidying. And magically, it's no longer a shoe graveyard in front of the door. And all the dishes are happening to get washed again. And I don't have clothes that are making me feel guilty by the side of the bed. And so what's a solution? Because we all have the same amount of time in the day. We're all exhausted, and we all have different obligations. And so there's no better or worse. It's just, what are my priorities? And if that's something that bothers me, what's a routine that I can implement to address an issue that's bothering me for whatever reason? And I think another one is the idea of competition versus collaboration.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that Montessori fosters collaboration over competition, which it's a very, very peaceful place, and there's not bullying or anything negative like that. But there's this really healthy form of competition that's positive peer pressure. Well, my friend did that. I want to do that too. And using competition as fuel for self-improvement, rather than reason for negativity or feelings of ill will, or any of those pieces of having, if there's another business in your area that is infringing on your client base, well, that's a good thing. We're gonna view this as a good thing, because that just requires us to step up our game and demonstrate all the ways that we can address a client's needs more effectively with a higher level of customer service, better listening. It encourages all of us to be better rather than a threat. To view competition as fuel rather than a threat, I think is hugely important.
I love that. Yeah, I think when you look at a lot of leaders and successful people, they often have some sort of drive or fire or competitive nature. But then somewhere along the way, we're told that that's a bad thing, right? Like that, But again, it doesn't have to be zero sum. We can all win or use that as inspiration. I love that.
Yeah, if you like the Olympics, you don't win because you tripped your neighbor. You win because you worked hard and you kept putting in the time. So competition, as in sabotage, is always negative. It doesn't bring out the best. But competition, as a drive to improve, is only good.
Yeah, and that makes sense that you said you're a big habit person. That first part, reverse engineering, reminds me a lot of in James Clear's book of Atomic Habits and habit triggers and stacking habits, so that when I do this, then I do this. It's all good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's move into the end here. I want to ask you a couple questions about yourself and just your leadership journey. So I don't know if you're a reader. What's the book you're reading right now?
I am currently reading The Death of Mrs. Westaway. I only listen to books, but I keep track. And so far this year, this is my 64th book.
Whoa.
So I listen to a
prolific.
lot of
Yeah.
I listen to nonfiction and fiction, but I really like reading.
And is there a time, speaking of habits, is it on a walk? Is it before bed or any time?
All of it. I listen to books while I'm getting ready for my day, always when I'm doing chores, and then I tend to wind down my evening, kind of the opposite of what you're supposed to do, of listening to my book and playing some Sudoku before, now cool. I'm tired.
So a question we ask, this would be interesting to ask the children at Baan Dek, but a question we ask Lemonly when we interview is, what's your superpower? So what's the one thing you do better than anyone else? Makes you brag about yourself?
Well, I have a healthy dose of self-esteem, so I think I'm good at a lot of things. I am a strong Enneagram 1, so I'm always looking for ways to improve things. So like, what can we do better? What worked? What didn't? But also professionally, I think my superpower is talking to parents.
I would vouch for that. I think Paige would too. That's great. So I've only been asking this question to folks on the show who are parents, but I feel like you're a unique exception, because although you are not a parent right now, you have certainly spent way more time with children than even I have. So what's a parenting tip or piece of advice, knowing that you're not a parent, but you've got plenty of experience?
Nothing bad is happening. There's a few things that I say often, and they're kind of like, I feel like a meme of my own self, but I also say nothing bad is happening. This is all very, very solvable. I think parenting is very lonely, but you are not alone. You are the first person to raise this child, but you are not the first parent to have difficulty with bedtime, or getting in the car seat or eating dinner or whatever it is. And if you are willing to ask for help, help will always emerge. And I think in general, if you are willing to ask for help, you do not have to come up with the solution. You do not even have to figure out the true question. But if you can figure out what a problem is, then help will always emerge. And it's a lot less scary when you say it in your outside voice.
That's great. So you're the productive version of the "this is fine" meme with the dog and the mug and the burning room.
Yeah.
The non-sarcastic version. Maybe you just answered it, but I've been asking people in this time of crisis, because we all need a little, we need to pay attention to our mental health and our mental wellness. How do you unplug? What do you do when you're stressed to just unplug a little bit?
I put things in order. So I Sudoku and I knit and I sew, and I like to put things in order, make lists. So
that's good. You control what you can control, right?
Exactly.
Perfect. And then the last question, Charlotte, is who are the leaders that influenced you? So I think you're a leader. When you look back on your life, mentors, people, maybe even people you don't know, who inspires and has led you? I have a lot of really strong women in my life who just played a really strong role in my life in very different ways. High school is a hard time to see the best in children. And there was a woman who played a strong role in my life, and her name was Betsy, and we did a lot of religious events together. And she was definitely a quiet leader, and not a noisy leader, but she saw the best in me. And my mom and I have aunts who all are very, very different people. But sometimes when I find myself in a challenging situation, or wanting to be sure to act with integrity, or wanting to be sure to do what is hard, but not what I necessarily want to do or what's appealing, channeling one of those people. That's great. And it sounds like those are people you still can rely on anytime you need them.
Yep. If I can't call them up, I can certainly call back a memory and ask, what would so-and-so do? And the answer is always there, and it's rarely easy.
Great. Well, Charlotte, thank you for the time today. I think you helped us get a look inside of what's going on, how schools are changing, how we think about leadership for young children, but also a lot of really good lessons that we all as adults can apply to our lives today. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, that was episode 11 of the Leadmore Podcast. Thank you so much to Charlotte Snyder for joining us. I'm so happy to have that school for my girls to be able to go there. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. And I hope you can take some of those lessons and apply to your life here today. I think that Montessori philosophy can do us all a little good right now. So be safe, be well, and remember, new episodes of the Leadmore Podcast drop every Thursday evening. Thanks.